I want to talk today about everybody's favorite subject, and that's street photography. Now, I've done a lot of classic, traditional street photography, and I've done a fair bit of what I call street portraits, and that's what I want to talk about today. It's a gallery show that I did on street portraits. Maybe you'll find it interesting. My name is Rob Skeoch. I'm a career photographer, and I've been shooting professionally for over 45 years, and I've been shooting film for over 50 years. Maybe some of these techniques that I've learned as a photographer shooting for Major League Baseball and the NFL, getting published by magazines like Sports Illustrated and even National Geographic, maybe some of these tips will be useful to you as you want to learn about film photography. Now, before we dive right in, I just want to mention that Ilford Photo has featured my black and white portraits of Rodeo Cowboys on their website. So if you go to ilfordphoto.com and just do a search for rodeo or cowboys or Rodeo Cowboys, this feature will come up that shows my black and white work with the Cowboys, all shot on Ilford product. Maybe you'll find that interesting. As we discuss street photography, I want to give you the background to this show that I put together on street portraits. Now, I worked at Sony full-time, but part of me always wanted to teach photography at the college level. But in Ontario, you need to have a master's degree to teach at college. So I went back to school and got a Master of Fine Art degree. So I went to a school called Maine Media. It used to be called Maine Media School of Design, and before that it was the Maine Photographic Workshops. So it's in the state of Maine, and they've always held tons of photography workshops there. If you want to learn photography, that is a great place to go. And if you want to get a master's degree, that is also a great place to go. I would recommend it. I'll put it in the link below. Anyways, I'm trying to get my master's degree, and I'm taking various courses, mostly on documentary photography. And one of my instructors for one semester was an American photographer, Peter Turnley. Now, I've never met Peter Turnley. He's based out of Paris, and we would talk on the phone every Friday, and I would send him files, and he would look at them, and we would butt heads. So I was working on this semester, and I'm looking for a project, and you need a project that you can really sink your teeth into. You need a project. This isn't a parade. This is something that you can go to repeatably. You're going to put a real time commitment in. It might cost you some money. You've really got to be committed to this. So it takes a bit of work to find the right project. And I butted heads with Peter for the whole semester, and I never really found the right project, to be honest, until the very end. But I was going to cafes and old parts of town and, photographing the cafes, and maybe there would be some people there, or maybe someone would come out of the cafe. It was winter, so people would be having a coffee, and they'd come out and have a smoke, so I would try to get a portrait of them. I did some stuff with a church. Maybe there was something I could get there. I went to a monastery and worked with some monks. Maybe there was something I could get there. Nothing really was working. Now, I met a group of guys while doing this who ran a used bike shop, and it was kind of a mission project from a church. So the church supported them, and they would repair used bikes. People would donate their bikes. They would repair these bikes and sell them and make some money and train people on how to do bike repair. And that was like a skill that people acquired. So I kind of hung out there a little bit because it was cold. They always welcome you, and I knew the guy a little bit. And I started to photograph some of the people that were part of this bike repair setup. Anyways, one of the guys said, well, we often end up spending the night at a building, a couple of buildings away, a house that's going to be torn down. So then we don't know where we're going to live. So I said, well, let's go check out this place. And we went there, and I did some portraits of a couple of the guys there. And I'm looking at this place, and it's going to get ripped down next week. And I thought, this would be a nice spot for me to do a self-portrait. Yeah, I'm going to do a self-portrait on this cool building before they rip it down. And then I thought, well, I'm going to do it on 5x7. I'm going to come here with my 5x7 camera and do a portrait of myself, in black and white. Sounds like a good idea. Now, so I've set up this 5x7 camera to do a portrait, but I need someone to fire the shutter. And a guy walks by, and he fires the shutter. We do a couple of frames, so that's great. And then I photograph him, and we get talking, and he doesn't live on the street. He lives in an apartment on the street. So not a street person, but he kind of considers himself a bit of the sheriff of this street. And you know, I thought, well, maybe there's something here that is a story. And I had my 5x7 camera, and I thought, well, you know, instead of digital, which had been shooting, you know, I've got the 5x7, but I've also got a weird 4x10 Panorama camera that I bought for a project. The project fell apart, and I never really used it. And I thought, this would be a good project to shoot on 4x10 Panorama. So the semester ends with Peter, and I go to the next semester, and I've got this project in mind. And there was a building there at the corner of Hope and Kenilworth. So this is a gritty part of town in Hamilton, Canada. And Hope and Kenilworth, here's a spot I'm going to start to do street photography. Mostly buildings it started with, and I tried to do some portraits as well. So the project is kind of evolving, and I photographed, you know, the sheriff type of a guy. Now he's an interesting character. He ends up, I photographed him a couple of times for this project. He was around a lot. He ends up being murdered in his apartment. It's a tough part of town, as I said. Anyways, I'm photographing, and I'm doing like some derelict buildings and some derelict parking lots, and it's a rundown kind of area. Not super dangerous, but you did have to kind of look out for yourself. So as I mentioned, originally it started as digital, and then I did the self-portrait, and then I started to build this project on 4x10 Panorama. Now I was shooting with a Shenhao 4x10 camera, and I was using Ilford's Delta 100 film, which you could get annually. You had to buy enough for the full year on the annual film cut that Ilford does. So special order once a year, they manufacture all this large format film. So I buy tons of boxes, and I started to shoot this project on this. Again, starting with buildings, and then parking lots and derelict, and then you're there with a 4x10 camera. You tend to meet people. So I started to meet people just who they lived on the street. They're not living on the street. They live in apartments on the street. I don't think I photographed anyone who's a street person. Everyone just lives or works or plays on this street, kind of in this area of Hope and Kenilworth, which became the name of the show, the corner of Hope and Kenilworth. Anyways, so I start to photograph people with the 4x10. I would kind of find a background, and maybe I'd knock on a door, find out who lived there to be in front of their building, or maybe while I was setting up, someone would come out and say, like, what are you doing? So when you're shooting with a 4x10 camera, you're not stealing a lot of photos. Everyone knows you're there. It's going to take a little bit of time. There were great pictures that the people just didn't have time right now, and it never worked out. I remember photographing one guy, and a guy walks by with like an iguana on his head, and I don't know, I'm photographing this guy. I missed the iguana guy. Always happens like that. Anyways, photograph people and pick a background. Now, in this particular shot, I thought it was an interesting background. And then a guy who I'd kind of seen around, and people had seen me around. I was there a lot. I was there on basically every day off I had. I would go. Now, I didn't have a lot of film holders, so you would load up the 4x10 film, and then maybe I had 6 holders. So your day's shoot, the town was, you know, a 40-minute drive away. So I would go and I would shoot my 6 holders. So that's 10 or 12 frames. Then I'd be kind of done, and that would be the day. But I went there mostly on my days off. After work, it became summertime, so that it was brighter longer, and, you know, just kept going back and going back and going back. In the end, I did it for 1 year. So after a while, people notice you. You've got this big camera. You've got a cloth over your head, right? I mean, people are going to notice you. You're not stealing photographs. Everyone knows what's going on. It's a great conversation starter. Now, I did have an 8x10 enlarger at the time. Previously, I'd shot 8x10. That's another sad story. But anyways, now I have a 4x10 and I have an 8x10 enlarger. But you can only, it's got a cool head or a cold head, And it's basically a fluorescent tube is lighting it, this 8x10 and larger. And you couldn't use multi-grade papers because the green light basically was screwing up the contrast with a multi-grade paper. So you could only use graded paper, which that became a problem because you really couldn't get a lot of graded paper. You'd order it, it would take weeks and weeks to come in. So this became a problem. And because of this graded paper scenario, I tended to shoot everything in the shadow side of the street. So I needed to control the contrast a bit. And if you were out in full sun, full brightness, you might not be able to control the contrast. So I tended to work in the shadow side of the street, shooting into the shadows so that anything white or bright wouldn't blast out. Plus it was summer and you're underneath a dark cloth, it's 30 degrees outside, so you're boiling. I don't know, maybe the shadow side is part of that reason as well. Anyways, I would photograph people, I would find a background, I would photograph people. Now, this particular woman, again, she's on the main corner of this area that I'm in. I talked to her a number of times, and she had what they call a garage sale store. So her partner goes on Saturday to many garage sales, probably in the better part of town or in better towns. And they would buy up all the stuff, all the kids' toys and stuff, and they'd bring it back to the store and they'd put a margin on it. And this was how they made their living. They resold stuff that they bought at garage sales. It was a garage sale store. It wasn't the only one on the street. Anyways, she was there, and I was chatting with her all the time, and I did this photo of her. Now, one day the store was gone, and I asked around, like, what happened? There was a shooting on the street right in front of her store, right there, and she thought, I'm done, and she just packed up and moved away. Never could find her. Don't know where she went. I tried to give people prints after, but again, it was a bit of a process from the day I photographed you to the day I had a print available. That was weeks and weeks and weeks. Some people had already moved on. I went back as many times as I could with prints to give to people, but it wasn't as easy. You might have had their address, but they were no longer there, no forwarding address. Some people weren't from town. Anyways, I tried to give prints to them, couldn't do it. But this woman with the garage sale store, there was a shooting in front of her, and she packed up and she was gone. So that's kind of an interesting little thing. Now, there was some areas that I photographed the background a few times. Now, this guy here with his granddaughter, she's out of school and they're hanging out, and he's happy to have his picture done. And this fenced in kind of area, of course, everyone would roll down the gates in front of their stores during the evening, or maybe they had swing out gates, kind of like a fence like this. So it's a gritty part of town, and you would find a background and you would use it again and again. And then I went, into the pool hall, and there was some people there that were, part of a group photo that didn't really work out. I might have done that differently next time. But I did get this. This is probably my favorite photo from the whole shoot, is this gentleman in front of in the pool hall, so inside the pool hall. This would probably be like a 10-second exposure. And the camera that I was using, as I mentioned, the Shenhao 4x10, but I had a couple different lenses that covered 4x10. I had a Nikon 120 f8, and that was super wide, but it covered the 8x10 format. So I used that a lot. It would be like probably a 24mm lens. And then I had 210 that covered, I had a 300 and a 450. And those longer ones I probably didn't use that much on this project. But I would hang around, I would start conversations, people would chat with me. Some would chat and didn't want to be photographed, that's great. Some would chat and would be convinced to be photographed. Some were kind of looking for me, hey, I see you here all the time, maybe I wouldn't mind being part of the project. So it was kind of a combination of both of these things. I went to the local school. The school grounds, there were pretty rough areas, unkept, underfinanced, probably more than anything over the years. 49ers fan there seemed to be everywhere. This kid with the skateboard again. I'm hanging out. There's a funny thing that we would say at college. Stewart would say it. I guess he invented it. If you wait 5 minutes, you'll get a gift. I'll tell you, in photography, if you wait 5 minutes, you'll get a gift. It's not a bad way to be. And I set up for this picture at this schoolyard with the fence, and I waited. And I waited 5 minutes to get a gift. And I probably waited 3 hours. I thought it was a great photo. There was just nobody around. And then these two kids came by on skateboards, and I asked, could I photograph them? And they said, well, we're going to go ask our mom. So they went and asked their mom, and then they came back, and I photographed them in this schoolyard. So that you wait 5 minutes, you get a gift. This was you wait 3 hours and you get a gift. But again, it's a nice picture. Would have been nice if the hat didn't match the sky or the clouds. The sky is, I've probably got a filter on here, I can't remember. But the clouds and the hat are blending a little bit, and it's hard to control all that, right? Again, now here we are back at the fence, and here we are right outside this woman's house. So I took her a print, and she was so excited. This just made her day to get this print. And the prints, so I did gallery prints. So the prints were large. They were printed on like 2024 paper. Now it would be cut in half because you would only need to use half the sheet. So these are probably the largest prints that these people ever had in their life. Anyways, these kids at the school ground, again, they're just playing. Now it's too tight of a crop. The camera was a little inconsistent with the cropping. So you would line it up, and then when you looked at the nags later, you thought, wow, it's just so much tighter than I remembered it. And 4x10 is a screwy format. I don't think I ever really got it with the 4x10. And the weird part is, so you've got this big negative, but the vertical is only 4 inches. So your subject is kind of small in the frame, although there's so much frame, because you've really got, they're in the 4 part, they're limited by the 4 inches, not the 10 inches. You're never really using the width of the thing. You're using the height, which is only 4 inches. So you're doing all this work, but you really only have a 4-inch working space for the subject. Anyways, some of the pictures were just a little bit tight. And, there was some demons around, and people were doing crack or whatever. So they would hang out, and we would hang out, and, it was all part of the fun and games of what we were doing. So in the end, I think there was a couple of pictures that I felt I needed to complete the story. And there's a few pictures here. I did a lot of pictures. I spent a year. There would be days I would go and I bought some more film holders. I'd go longer. I'd go and shoot and come home and switch out the film and go back. This was days and days of work. Just shooting and hanging out and shooting and hanging out and being patient and starting conversations with strangers. The camera itself is a conversation starter. So that works to your advantage. Like you're on a tripod, you've got a cloth over your head. This is a big wooden camera. Like people aren't walking by thinking, I wonder if he's taking a photo. They're pretty sure you're taking a photo. Anyways, interesting people would walk by and I would start a conversation. They would start a conversation. Some of them would lead to photographs. There were interesting people that I didn't ever photograph. There were pictures that didn't work. There were pictures, it's 4x10. There were fogged frames, poorly exposed frames, but overall it wasn't too bad of a show. So now I've got this show. So I've printed everything, as I said, 20 by 24, which is just kind of like 10 by 24. Everything is printed exactly the same size, so that when I cut the mats, they're all going to be the same. I take the prints to the framer. I've got a show booked at the Berlin Gallery, which sounds fantastic, but it was Berlin, the city of Kitchener, Waterloo, Canada. Used to be called Berlin until the war, and Berlin wasn't that great anymore. Anyways, so the Berlin Gallery, I had a show booked, and the show is going to be in April. So I've got, the project is done, and I take it to the framer and I get him to cut the mats, and I'm going to come back and sign all the mats. So again, I live in the middle of nowhere. So I take the pictures in, he cuts the mats, I drive back to the store another day, sign all the mats, and he frames them up. And again, I'm ahead of the curve. Like I'm not a leave it to the last minute guy. So February, I go there and all the pictures are framed, and I pay for all of the frames. It was under $3,000, but kind of in that area of $3,000 for all the pictures for the show. Now, the show is April 1st, 1 month show starting April 1st. Well, COVID hits in March. So now my show is canceled. Well, who knew in March what COVID was going to do? Like, how many weeks are we going to be out here? Is it going to be 2 weeks, or is it postponed 2 weeks, or the whole month of April? Well, we know how that worked out. So maybe 18 months later, I'm the first show at the gallery once COVID is kind of over. Now, I have paid for these frames months ago, like 18 months ago, thousands of dollars. That was probably a mistake. So in my organized mind, I'm taking the stuff in early and getting the work done, but it kind of worked out poorly in the sense that now I've got a framed show that was years, like 18 months later. So that wasn't great. The other thing about this weird panorama format, when I was done with the show, I just felt I was done with it. So I sold the camera, I was done with 8x10, I sold the enlarger, I was done with it. Now I've got like almost $3,000 worth of a weird shaped frame. I could buy a wide lux or a X-pan, something like that, and go back to shooting panorama, but I'm not really into panorama that much. So as I would caution, if you do shoot in these weird formats, you're going to end up with thousands of dollars worth of frames that will not transfer to every show that you're going to do. Because the next shows I did were not weird panorama, right? They were conventional prints. So just saying. Now, just a couple of other things. When the work was done, I did approach a magazine, a photo magazine, and they did a big feature on this work, and they put it on their website, so that was exciting. You do want to keep in touch with the photo magazines if you can. And I did a what I call the black book. So this is a book, and it's got notes. I kept my notes here, and there's different portraits of people and their contact info, and a contact print is slapped in there, and it's just a book that kind of just has this project in it. So maybe when I die, I can donate all this work to some archive, and there'll be a book with notes that kind of tie into the show. I think that's kind of important. Anyways, that's pretty well how it worked out. So I would do it differently probably next time. I did shoot it 4x10. Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe that's not a good idea. The COVID kind of worked against me a little bit, but I did end up having the show at the Berlin Gallery, and that was great. And overall, a great project. It was something you could really sink your teeth into. So is it street photography? Well, it's street portraits for sure. And maybe it's street photography. If it smells like the street, it's the street. I don't know. But they're not grab shots. It's not on the fly street photography because you're working with a 4x10 panorama camera, and it's a little bit limited. And your exposures are probably, I don't know, quarter of a second at f/22, something like that. Making that up, but you get the idea. So you're on a tripod. Everybody knows they're getting their picture taken. You're having a conversation with them. They have to hold still. They have to stand there and hold still. And they need a little bit of time. This is a 15-minute exercise. This isn't a 3-minute exercise for the most part. So anyways, I just wanted to share that about my solo gallery show on street portraits. Maybe there's some mistakes that I made that I was able to mention. Maybe there's some things that you're able to pick up and help you with your own photography. And if nothing else, hey, go to ilfordphoto.com and read about Rodeo Cowboys. Hope you